1. You could sell car racing stuff. It might be sport vehicle parts. You may represent a sport as fun. 2. You might make football things. It could be athletic uniforms. You can advertise a sport as good exercise. 3. You can market track and field products. It may be game shoes. You might illustrate a sport as entertaining. 4. You should invent tennis services. It can be sport online videos. You could define a sport as spirited. 5. You may promote snowboarding items. It might be athletic courses. You may express a sport as competitive. 6. You could create archery merchandise. It could be game targets. You can explain a sport as recreation. 7. You might advertise arm wrestling gear. It may be sport DVDs/CDs. You might promote a sport as a battle. 8. You can publicize dog racing info products. It can be athletic zines. You could portray a sport as conditioning. 9. You should suggest baseball equipment. It might be game bats. You may present a sport as an accomplishment. 10. You may endorse laser tag events. It could be sport safety gears. You can label a sport as a team sport. 11. You could distribute badminton accessories. It may be game nets. You might depict a sport as a workout. 12. You might auction gymnastics supplies. It can be game suits. You could market a sport as physical. 13. You can publish lacrosse stuff. It might be sport e-classes. You may sell a sport as exciting. 14. You should sell powerlifting tools. It could be athletic weights. You can describe a sport as gratifying. 15. You may make motorcycle racing stuff. It may be game helmets. You might outline a sport as practice. 16. You could market marathon things. It can be sport shorts. You could summarize a sport as a tradition. 17. You might invent mini-golf products. It might be athletic clubs. You may represent a sport as pleasurable. 18. You can promote wrestling services. It could be game training. You can advertise a sport as fitness. 19. You should create aerobatics items. It may be sport CDs. You might illustrate a sport as a challenge. 20. You may advertise horse racing. Merchandise. It can be athletic photos. You could define a sport as rewarding. 21. You could publicize ping pong gear. It might be game tables. You may express a sport as skill builder. 22. You might suggest soccer equipment. It could be sport shirts. You can explain a sport as brutal. 23. You can endorse Kung Fu info products. It may be athletic magazines. You might promote a sport as playing. 24. You should distribute cricket events. It can be game tickets. You could portray a sport as training. 25. You may auction frisbee accessories. It might be sport discs. You may present a sport as winning. 26. You could publish karate supplies. It could be athletic belts. You can label a sport as speed increaser. 27. You might sell golf stuff. It may be game video games. You might depict a sport as a championship. 28. You can make paintball tools. It can be sport guns. You could market a sport as weight remover. 29. You should market sledding machinery. It might be athletic sleds. You may sell a sport as revitalizing. 30. You may invent cycling things. It could be game bikes. You can describe a sport as a contest. 31. You could promote off-road racing products. It may be sport newsletters. You might outline a sport as relaxing. 32. You might create diving services. It can be athletic classes. You could summarize a sport as achievement. 33. You can advertise skateboarding items. It might be game pads. You may represent a sport as a match. 34. You should publicize taekwondo merchandise. It could be sport pictures. You can advertise a sport as stamina booster. 35. You may suggest boxing gear. It may be athletic gloves. You might illustrate a sport as a playoff. 36. You could endorse roller skating equipment. It can be game skates. You could define a sport as athletics 37. You might distribute drag racing info products. It might be sport online videos. You may express a sport as strategic. 38. You can auction fencing events. It could be athletic passes. You can explain a sport as stretch helpful. 39. You should publish hockey accessories. It may be game pucks. You might promote a sport as chance. 40. You may sell high/long jump supplies. It can be sport consulting. You could portray a sport as interesting. 41. You could make skeet shooting machinery. It might be athletic weapons. You may present a sport as energizing. 42. You might market gymnastics tools. It could be game music. You can label a sport as dangerous. 43. You can invent bobsledding stuff. It may be sport at courses. You might depict a sport as joyful. 44. You should promote polo things. It can be athletic membership sites. You could market a sport as a tournament. 45. You may create lumberjacking products. It might be game t-shirts. You may sell a sport as bodybuilder. 46. You could advertise run racing services. It could be sport coaching. You can describe a sport as grudge match. 47. You might publicize ninja/jujitsu items. It may be athletic wear. You might outline a sport as motivating. 48. You can suggest bull riding merchandise. It can be game autographs. You could summarize a sport as a good warm-up. 49. You should endorse dune bugging gear. It might be sport books. You may represent a sport as rematch. 50. You may distribute shot, put/discus equipment. It could be athletic DVDs. You can advertise a sport as enjoyable. 51. You could auction judo info products. It may be game reports. You might illustrate a sport as tension blocker. 52. You might publish softball events. It can be sport seating. You could define a sport as a showdown. 53. You can sell pole vault accessories. It might be athletic poles. You may express a sport as amusing. 54. You should make basketball supplies. It could be game backboards. You can explain a sport as dramatic. 55. You may market bullfighting machinery. It may be sport caps. You might promote a sport as a fat burning. 56. You could invent swimming tools. It can be athletic goggles. You could portray a sport as superb. 57. You might promote boat racing stuff. It might be game boats. You may present a sport as safe. 58. You can create 8-ball pool things. It could be sport sticks. You can label a sport as toner upper. 59. You should advertise skiing products. It may be athletic skis. You might depict a sport as invigorating. 60. You may publicize 9-ball pool services. It can be game workshops. You could market a sport as lively. 61. You could suggest bowling items. It might be sport pins. You may sell a sport as pastime. 62. You might endorse sumo wrestling merchandise. It could be athletic toys. You can describe a sport as awesome. 63. You can distribute canoeing gear. It may be game paddles. You might outline a sport as fair. 64. You should auction mixed martial arts equipment. It can be sport mats. You could summarize a sport as approving agility. 65. You may publish freestyle biking info products. It might be athletic ebooks. You may represent a sport as profession. 66. You could sell ballet items. It could be game dresses. You can advertise a sport as Talent 67. You might make hunting accessories. It may be sport camouflage. You might illustrate a sport as playoff round. 68. You can market kickball supplies. It can be athletic balls. You could define a sport as pound reducer. 69. You should invent ice skating machinery. It might be game skates. You may express a sport as a confrontation. 70. You may promote truck racing tools. It could be sport tires. You can explain a sport as inspiring. 71. You could create kickboxing stuff. It may be athletic bags. You might promote a sport as improving endorses. 72. You might advertise hurdles things. It can be game posters. You could portray a sport as fast pace. 73. You can publicize arena football products. It might be sport hats. You may present a sport as thrilling. 74. You should suggest scuba diving services. It could be athletic instructing. You can label a sport as career. 75. You may endorse mountain biking items. It may be game water bottles. You might depict a sport as victorious. 76. You could distribute kendo gear. It can be sport swords. You could market a sport as a fat reducers. 77. You might auction volleyball merchandise. It might be athletic keychains. You may sell a sport as mental. 78. You can publish speed ice skating equipment. It could be game clothes. You can describe a sport as adventurous. 79. You should sell rugby info products. It may be sport slideshow. You might outline a sport as a art. 80. You may make endurance racing items. It can be athletic foods. You could summarize a sport as masterful. 81. You could market rowing services. It might be game schooling. You may represent a sport as trimming down. 82. You might invent handball supplies. It could be sport devices. You can advertise a sport as a war. 83. You can promote demolition derby machinery. It may be sport cars. You might illustrate a sport as occupation. 84. You should create bodybuilding tools. It can be game gym machines. You could define a sport as hobby. 85. You may advertise cheerleading stuff. It might be sport pom-poms. You may express a sport as heated rivals. 86. You could publicize martial arts things. It could be athletic video games. You can explain a sport as anxiety stopper. 87. You might suggest mountain climbing products. It may be game ropes. You might promote a sport as hostile. 88. You can endorse water skiing services. It can be sport skis. You could portray a sport as a performance. 89. You should distribute surfing items. It might be sport boards. You may present a sport as weight lose. 90. You may auction bike racing merchandise. It could be game cups. You can label a sport as fulfilling. 91. You could publish darts gear. It may be sport darts. You might depict a sport as an ability. 92. You might sell equestrian equipment. It can be athletic horses. You could market a sport as controversial. 93. You can make airsoft info products. It might be game e-reports. You may sell a sport as stress reducer. 94. You should market kayaking services. It could be sport teaching. You can describe a sport as a struggle. 95. You may invent twirling accessories. It may be athletic baton. You might outline a sport as improving quickness. 96. You could promote fishing supplies. It can be game poles. You could summarize a sport as healthy. 97. You might create rafting products. It might be sport life jackets. You may represent a sport as animated. 98. You can advertise obstacle course tools. It could be athletic obstacles. You can advertise a sport as pro/amateur/college. 99. You should publicize dancing stuff. It may be sport songs. You might illustrate a sport as quick scoring. 100. You may suggest ski jumping things. It can be sport ramps. You could define a sport as a calorie burner.